Hey everybody, this is Taylor. Before we get to today's episode, which was recorded on Monday afternoon, I did want to note that I think while we were recording the show, the news broke, or an article was published in the New York Times by Tariq Panja, which essentially indicates that UEFA investigators would like to ban Manchester City from the Champions League. There is lots to this story. I suggest you go and try to read the article, or you read more about the reporting of the article. But it's worth noting that this isn't about like the nuances of financial fair play, as Tariq noted, but it's over allegations that the club provided false information on its sponsorship agreements to UEFA and acted in bad faith. I think there's also an involvement of hacked emails, media issues as well. All of that is worth checking out. But since Ryan and I do get into sort of singing the praises of Manchester City and their transfer policy, we also talk a little bit about the Court of Arbitration for Sport in relation to Chelsea's transfer situation. It felt necessary to include something so that our listeners weren't wondering why we were talking about these things so glowingly and favorably without mentioning the fact that Man City might get booted from the Champions League. I would say might with a big old asterisk because I doubt it ends up happening, but that's my editorializing for facts and other people's editorializing. Go check out Tariq Panja's article and the coverage that surrounds it as well. So all that said, on with today's Total Soccer Show Weekend Review. Everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Total Soccer Show, a weekend review episode of the Total Soccer Show. I am Taylor Rockwell, and joining me, I've got a man who's defying, I should say, British stereotypes. It's Ryan Bailey. Hello, Ryan.
Ooh, Tay-Tay, I love your way every day, particularly Mondays when I get to speak to you. I'm doing very well, thank you. I have been to the dentist today. Half of my face was numb for most of the day. I've retained feeling now. I've had feeling for about the last 15 minutes, so I think I can hold a conversation with you.
I appreciate that. I like the idea of us getting like injury reports at the very last minute, similar to how I forget who was scrapped for Liverpool like right before kickoff. But I like the idea of doing that for you, Ryan Bailey, of like having you sort of update us like, okay, face slightly less numb. I think I'm good to go.
Yeah, I can feel my tongue. I can feel all of it now, which is good. That's progress from when I ate my lunch earlier.
Perfect. All right. Well, we've got lots to talk about. Mostly, I think we're going to be in the Premier League since it was the final weekend of the season, final games of the season, all happening at once. And as I believe you noted in the show notes, it was a scary 83 seconds for Manchester City, who are your Premier League champions yet again.
They are indeed. Congratulations to them. Obviously, I think I saw this coming a little while ago. An incredible finish from Manchester City, though. Well, those, was it 14 wins on the spin at the end of the season? I mean, to show that kind of mettle at the end of a Premier League campaign, when you've got a team who are as incredible as Liverpool, breathing down your neck all of those games, I think that shows such fortitude, and that really speaks well of Pep Guardiola and this side. And, you know, there's been a lot of fine margins in this race. The 29.51 millimetre title, we've heard some people calling it because of those clearances and whatnot. But, I mean, you can't really begrudge City for this, can you?
No, not at all. I mean, and to your point, I think Guardiola referred to this as the most difficult title he had ever won because they had to win the 14th straight because Liverpool pushed them so much. And so I think you're absolutely right that like it was billed as, you know, there were so many title changes. Really, that was like the game in hand situation. It wasn't really that like one team kept dropping and one team kept picking up. But that in and of itself was sort of compelling because for both teams to kind of go on the run and the consistent run at that they did makes it that much more impressive. And kind of the fact that there weren't, at least with City, to my mind, there weren't too many of those sort of like, oh, things are falling apart. How's Guardiola going to fix this? It feels like he kind of had control from the beginning till the end. Yeah. There were slips and mistakes here and there, and I'm sure he would like to a Champions League do-over, and that's probably something he'll be focusing on next year, as it seems to be every year. But I think overall, it was just sort of, it wasn't an air of inevitability about it, but I think it was an air of inevitability that it was going to be these two really pushing each other, and I think that's exactly what happened, and City end up on top.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't disparage Pep too much for the Champions League situation because I think the way the semi-finals went, I think it shows it's a bit of a lottery when you get to this stage of the Champions League, whereas obviously it's a bit more meticulous and planned and you have to be better week in, week out to win a league. And, you know, he's the first manager to retain a league title in Spain, in Germany and in England. And there's lots of people saying, yeah, but he had the best squad in each one of those. But there's definitely an art to extracting the very best out of elite talent, and that's something that Pep does. And you can't just say, oh, whatever, when Harry Redknapp says, he should go manage Accrington Stanley or whatever it is he says, it doesn't really work like that, does it? You can say what you like about Pep and his choice of knitwear, but I think he really does a very, very good job at motivating players, at setting up his team, and of extracting the extra 1% out of those players.
I would agree with that. I would add, and I'm not breaking new ground here, I think this is something you and I have talked about. I think Daryl and I have talked about it too, that like Guardiola, I think, is very good at getting the best out of the players that want the best to be brought out of themselves.
Yeah.
But if it's a player that either doesn't fit or maybe isn't kind of looking for that type of instruction, then I think they kind of don't get stuck in the sunk cost fallacy. And I think that is where maybe they do get a little bit of criticism for buying more left backs, buying more right backs, buying another goalkeeper. But I think that's kind of modern soccer. That's modern football, especially in the Premier League, that you've got to kind of be ruthless in your appraisals of the talent and the players you have, and be willing to really stick with it and kind of try to bring change out of players who you think are responding. I would say Raheem Sterling is a prime example of that. But for players that aren't, then you kind of got to say, like, okay, fine, then we'll bring in somebody who will respond. And I think it kind of forces the squad to react accordingly, because if it's, as maybe we'll get to with another Manchester team later on, if it feels like, well, that guy doesn't have to do it and that guy doesn't have to do it, why should I have to work that hard? Then it suddenly kind of infects the locker room. And I think Guardiola is very good about weeding out those issues. And I think that's a big part of why they're able to remain so consistent, and also because he's kind of terrifying. And I think that factors into it as well.
You think Pep's terrifying?
A little bit. I think he is one of, if he rivals Daniel Day-Lewis as like most intense people that I assume exist in any given moment. Just he seems so intense that I think if I asked him a question, I'll put it this way: if I had like an opportunity to ask him a 1v1 question, there is no way in hell I keep eye contact as soon as he starts talking, because I would ask a question and I feel like I would just instantly be like, wow, he is staring into my soul. I'm going to look away, and I just feel like he's got that sort of intense intimidation about him without ever being really intimidating. He's not physically imposing. He's not getting all up in your face. He just has that like quiet calmness that you feel like if he needed to, he could cut me in half if the situation required.
Yeah, I think he might be terrifying in the sense of like a big dog that won't stop jumping up at you might be intense and terrifying.
Yeah.
He's not in the same way as someone who thinks going to punch you in the face repeatedly. There's a difference there, isn't there? Definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, but
I do want to talk more about this season and kind of what we see next season, but I first have this question. So Noel Gallagher was in the dressing room celebrating. I believe they were very off-key singing Wonderwall at one point. But my question is this. Noel Gallagher has been and is probably the most famous Man City fan there is, but I can't imagine that's going to last much longer. Like, do you think those players in the locker room listen to Oasis, like really care about Oasis, or do you think they just know, like, oh yeah, it's a rock star who like likes us and wants to be in the locker room?
I think even now they're probably like, oh yeah, that's a band my dad likes, maybe, because
there you go.
Wonderwall came out 95, 96. By the way, when did it happen that City took Minnesota United's official song and made it their own?
It seems like thievery, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that.
Interesting. And
hijacking.
But and if Noel Gallagher is is the number one Man City fan, you're power ranking your Gallagher brothers there, which is a controversial thing in itself. But I would agree with you. A couple of other observations from this game that I enjoyed. A tweet from Sunderland. Congratulations to Man City, who've joined Sunderland by becoming 6-time champions of England. The race for the next one is on. I enjoyed that very much. Just like in the celebrations themselves, which took forever, by the way. I was like, geez, it's like 40 minutes after the game finished and we're still watching Zinchenko walk up and get his medal. But when the fans chant, Taylor, I love that in the UK they say Championes, not Campeones. They've kind of half lifted the Spanish. It's like it's still British because we say Championes. But
I don't know when that got crossed over, because I do feel like in my lifetime it has been Campeones is the song they sing, but maybe it's just, it's a product of the Premier League that they rebranded it as Championes. You have to sing this one now to make it slightly more English.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, it might have been 99 and your aforementioned team you're angry at the Nou Camp doing their treble thing. I think it might have come from that era. I'm not sure, though.
I can't imagine Roy Keane voluntarily speaking Spanish. That doesn't seem like a thing that he would go for. I think he would be, and I can't imagine him singing a song. So I don't know if he did much celebrating. He certainly didn't do much celebrating this weekend. City getting the win. I wanted to ask you a couple questions, or we wanted to go over a few things. I wanted to start with Vincent Kompany, because scores the goal against Leicester, the absolutely ridiculous goal, and that feels like the type of moment that leads a player to maybe sign off. But like you've scored this incredible goal. It's become a narrative that like Captain Fantastic shows up and keeps the title race alive and ends up with the important goal that ends up winning the title. Do you think we see more from Vincent Kompany next season as a player, or do you think we've started to see him sort of transitioning into maybe getting a couple minutes but not very reliable in terms of consistent minutes? Do you think we see him maybe take a front office position or an ambassadorial role?
If I was a show writer on the Vincent Kompany show, Tay, I think this would be the sign-off. The substitution that he got in that final game and the sort of standing ovation he got, and obviously in the penultimate game doing what he did, and just that sort of hero arc he's had even at the end of this season, where it seemed like he was done with this Man City team. He was at least fourth place in the centre-back pecking order this season, and then suddenly has come in and earned his place. Is partnering Laporte for, I think, is that 6 of the last 7 games that he's got in over Stones, which nobody expected. Nobody saw that coming, but he's done it. And despite having, the past 4 seasons completely ruined by injury, missing at least 50% of games through injury, for him to come back and do that at the very end of this season, it would seem like a very neat little bow to me for him to sort of duck out at this point. And he said, I'm going to speak to Pep. We're going to go for a beer after the season and talk about it. By the way, if you're terrified of Pep, think of him having a beer and how much more terrifying he might be after he's probably been mainlining coffee all day as well. But I don't know. I don't. He's only, is it 33? He's not terribly
he just turned
old.
33.
Just turned 33. So he doesn't have to step down at this point. But I think it would be a good exit point, don't you?
I do. I would also add, I cannot imagine Pep Guardiola ordering beer. I think about all the craft breweries here in Richmond, and I feel like he would go through the menu meticulously to find the exact beer he wanted. But I could be wrong. He did spend some time in Bavaria, so maybe he's used to.
Do you think he's like one of those people when he's at the restaurant, he asks what's in everything, and that really annoys the waiter and takes up all their time? Is he one of those people?
I don't know, because he's so soft-spoken that I feel like there's a chance that he just kind of orders very quietly and then knows exactly what he wants. But makes unbroken eye contact. But yes, I think he also probably wants to make sure. I feel like he's a fitness guru, I'm going to assume. He's pretty svelte.
Yeah.
So I'm going to guess that comes with making sure you know exactly what you're eating at all times. And to bring it back to what we're talking about, know exactly who you're playing at all times. And I think that is kind of what I expect him to do with Vincent Kompany, is know what Vincent Kompany is capable of. I expect they will try to keep him around because Kompany has become such a huge part of that team and of that organization that I think maybe you look at him as a guy who can come in and do a job if you're maybe not trying to play like a high liner, because we did see him struggle with pace and have to concede, pick up some cards here and there and concede a few fouls that maybe they didn't want to concede because of the lack of pace or perceived lack of pace. So I think maybe you keep him around next season as a role player, as a squad player, as a person who can step in, because I do think that's one area where they may want to strengthen is the center back spot. So maybe he helps kind of bridge that gap a little bit. Well, we have that we've kind of, you posed that question in the show notes, and that's one area that I have it as maybe center backs. But we'll get to that in a moment, because I do also think that he's one who they'll want to keep around because he's been such a good servant to the club that I think they maybe will try to give him a front office job. Maybe they'll make an ambassador and see where that goes. I don't know if he wants to get into coaching, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does, if he starts with one of their various City Football Group organizations in some capacity, and we see where they go from there. So that's my thinking, is that he stays there next season but gets fewer minutes than we've maybe been accustomed to.
I feel like maybe not necessarily a better route for him, but maybe the route he'll take is that he doesn't play in the squad anymore and does stick around, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, he has done some coaching with the under-16s. He definitely does a lot of ambassadorial stuff with the club. I think that's where he's very strong. We've seen him give, in the All or Nothing documentary, we saw him give those rousing speeches after they won the league without kicking a ball and all that stuff. So I think he could be definitely kept around in the building, and there must be so many opportunities at that Etihad campus for jobs that he could do there. So I think that might be the best port of call for him.
All right. Yeah, so I'm with you on that one, but it does then lead to some of the moves, like to pondering some of the moves they've made and some of the moves they might make. One who I wanted to talk about was Riyad Mahrez. You've been writing about Man City this entire season. For The Athletic, you've been paying more attention to them than I guess you would have been otherwise. I'm wondering where you come down on the Riyad Mahrez signing, because that's one who at the time I thought was a little bit like, wow, you're going from great to maybe even greater by signing another kind of marquee player. They bring him in for $60 million. million. And I think you could make an argument he had a decent season, a good season. I think you could also make an argument that he had a very bad season, and I would kind of agree with both.
Yeah, so every week, Taylor, when I write for The Athletic, I send a list of pitches of ideas to write, and every week there's something about Riyad Mahrez, and it's not been picked up yet. But I think over the summer, I'm going to have something about Mahrez up on the site, because I think it's a really interesting question whether the gamble that he took in going to City was worthwhile, because obviously it's the only player they really strengthened with last summer. And you could say he's gone from being, the biggest fish in a smaller pond to a small fish in a bigger pond. And I think the gamble has paid off, because when he looks back on his career, he's just won another league title. When he looks back, he'll have played 6 times in the Champions League this season. He got 4 starts in the Champions League. 13 starts in a Premier League winning campaign. I mean, he could do a lot worse than having that on his resume. And obviously, people like to have the tutelage of Pep Guardiola. He's been able to work under someone who may be the best manager in the world. Whether he would have been better off sticking it at Leicester and maybe getting them even higher up, who knows what kind of effect he would have had if Brendan Rodgers had come in when he did, if that would have changed things at all. But I think the gamble, personally, for me, has paid off. I think he's been a very, very valuable squad player to City, and he's come in more often than I thought he would.
I mean, you could even make the argument if he stays at Leicester, maybe he scores a goal against them in that last game, or penultimate game, and maybe it's only a 1-1 draw instead. So there's that. But I would agree with you that I think it looks good for him. It will look good on his resume. And I think it also probably leads him to raise his game, because I think, similar to what Pep Guardiola said Liverpool did for Man City, I think being in that squad, being around so many very competitive people and a very competitive manager, you necessarily have to elevate your game. Otherwise, you're going to be kind of chewed out or chewed up and spat out, I guess, and moved on. And I also think he's in a situation where I do think he was brought in to sort of be a complement to Raheem Sterling, and then maybe Leroy Sané and Bernardo Silva could continue to develop. And I think basically Bernardo Silva has been one of those players who has really reached another level under Pep Guardiola. Yeah. And so I think if you have I get why you would automatically start Bernardo Silva and Raheem Sterling on the wings in every single game if they're fully fit and playing the way they have been. And so then that necessitates Riyad Mahrez moving to the bench. And so I think he's also a victim of two players playing at the height of their powers. He's not quite there, and so he kind of finds his way to the bench. I think that's the same for Leroy Sané, who is an outstanding player, but maybe just doesn't have the consistency or doesn't bring whatever Guardiola wants to the table, so that he's not going to be their out-and-out starter every single week.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's another case of a player who appears to be second choice, but isn't necessarily, where you can see with Vincent Kompany, where he's come in and has become first choice all of a sudden, and Mahrez keeping Leroy Sané on the bench for the entire game for this Brighton game and getting in ahead of him. So Pep obviously tailors his teams, and he changed up the formation here. He did a 4-4-2, well, kind of a 4-4-1-1, I suppose. He had Sterling tucked in behind Aguero. Very unusual for Pep to do that kind of thing, but obviously he saw something in what Brighton did when they gave him that scare in the FA Cup game, and set up accordingly. And Mahrez obviously being part of that plan, and I think he's definitely got a future at City. I think he still gets as many, if not more, minutes next season too.
Yeah, and I think he's also one who, I'm assuming he's on pretty high wages, but I'm assuming everybody on City is on pretty high wages, or at City is on pretty high wages. Yeah. So I also don't think it's one of those, like, he's sitting there, it's money burning a hole in their pocket. I don't think that's a thing they've ever had to worry about, but it's not an Alexis Sanchez situation, as an example. So it seems like one where, yes, there's been some stories about how he's unsettled, how he wants more minutes, how he's kind of unhappy, but there have also been stories about Guardiola apologizing to Riyad Mahrez and trying to find more roles for him and trying to find minutes for him. And it does feel like one where, if you look at the kind of depth of talent that Manchester City have and the number of competitions they're going to be involved in every single season, it feels like as long as you're content to maybe only start 14 to 20 games, 14 starts this season, like, I think then, in the Premier League that is, then I think that's a spot where he will kind of continue to develop and improve his game. If he doesn't like that, if he wants to move on, then I think there will be a number of suitors for him, and I'm sure some who will pay over the top for him. So I think either way, this season probably isn't as smashing of a success as he would have liked, but I think it still ends up in the positive column in my book. And that's what I'm going to go with. I'm also inclined to talk... Sorry, did you want to talk more about Riyad?
No, I was just thinking, you've made me think, if he did go somewhere, where would he go? And the first club that popped into my head was PSG for some reason.
I mean, I feel like that's always a safe bet. PSG, it would have been PSG and Monaco, but then Monaco seemed to have quit spending a little bit of money, so maybe not Monaco as much anymore.
Yeah.
But we're going to talk a little bit about what City may do. Ooh, sorry. Ooh. All right, coughing. That's fun. I'm going to note that one down. All right. And now. So we are going to talk a little bit more about what Man City may do next season, how they may improve, or what changes they may make. But first, we should probably talk about today's first sponsor, SeatGeek.
Getting tickets online, Tay, can be far too complicated. Hundreds of sites out there with varying levels of reliability. It's hard to know who to trust. That's why SeatGeek is the way to go. They pull millions of tickets into one place so you can easily find the seats you want for a price you're willing to pay. I've been looking at some stuff I'd like to go and attend, and obviously the International Champions Cup is coming to my town of Charlotte, North Carolina this summer. And checking out the tickets there. There's lots of things I like about the way SeatGeek do things. It's the way that obviously the purchases are fully guaranteed, and Homer Simpson went to see a team called the Spongos. There's none of that going on with SeatGeek. Nice old Simpsons reference for you there. You're welcome. I like the fact there's one of the best things, which I haven't mentioned before, is that you can toggle the price with fees or without. So they're right up there. They're admitting what you're getting with stuff, and I like that. And I like the way that it ranks whether the tickets are a good deal. It doesn't just start with the tickets which are the cheapest at the top. You get like a rating out of 10 telling you it's an amazing deal. And I'm just looking at Bank of America Stadium right now, just thinking, where am I going to sit for this game, Tay? Where am I going to sit? Where am I going to get the best view of whichever mess of players that Unai Emery decides to put out in this game?
That was going to be my question. Who is coming to Charlotte, North Carolina?
It's Arsenal and Roma.
Okay, Arsenal and Roma. So I feel like that would still, like, I want them to extend the value scale, which is like sort of, it tells you if it's worth the money, where you're going to be sitting and sort of what you're paying. But I want them to extend that to, like, are you sure you want to watch these two teams? Like, I'm trying to think of what the lowest, like, International Champions Cup, like, if it was like Manchester United versus, I'm not sure what, like, underperforming team would be a bummer to watch right now. But, like, those two teams, and if I, like, tried to pay, like, the price listed, I do wonder if they would give it like a low rating and be like, are you sure this is what you want to watch? Are you sure? Go watch a better team. Go watch better soccer.
You get a little pop-up saying, are you sure? Yeah, Netflix is quite good at the moment. Are you sure you want to do this?
But I do appreciate that if you want to attend International Champions Cup games or any athletic competitions, comedy events, theater, live shows, live music, SeatGeek has you covered. And if you get the app on your phone, it's the easiest way to sort of shop around for tickets, see what's coming to your area. You can make it local. You can then check like national ones or regional ones, because Richmond doesn't get the biggest shows always, but DC just to drive away, so you can sort of check and see what's going on.
How far are you from DC?
Either about 90 minutes or 6 hours, depending on Interstate 95.
Depending if you run or drive.
Yeah, I think the longest I've done was 4.5 hours.
Wow.
That was a super fun day. And then if you're really hustling, and if everybody on 95 is choosing to go about 10 miles over, which they usually are, then you can get up there pretty quickly. It kind of varies. So that's always the ideal. And then the ideal for our listeners is that they can get $10 off their first SeatGeek purchase. Ryan, how can they do that?
They can do that by going to SeatGeek.com and entering the promo code TSS. I think it's SeatGeek.com. Yes, it is. And they've got an app as well, which you can use, both of which are very pretty to look at. I love them very much. You can go there and use the promo code TSS, which stands for Total Soccer Show. I just figured that out.
Oh, good on you. You're so wise. You're so wise. All right. So thank you to SeatGeek for sponsoring today's episode. Thank you to Ryan for figuring things out on the fly. And thank you to Ryan for talking to me about Man City and not gloating. I know you're not like a huge City fan, but I feel like writing about them enough, you have a little bit of loyalty to them. But with that, I wanted to ask you then about your loyalties when it comes to next season, because usually there's one or two players who maybe kind of get moved on or cast aside. We talked about Vincent Kompany already. I don't think that will happen to Riyad Mahrez. Pep Guardiola has said he's going to be there, so I expect him to be there.
Yeah.
But I'm wondering, how do you think they will strengthen? What moves do you think they will make this offseason?
That's $1 million question, isn't it? Because you felt the same thing at the last season. How can they possibly make this team better? And it was Riyad Mahrez who was added in, which wasn't the ingredient that we expected it to be. I think the big the big question is defensive midfield, surely. That they still have to work on that Fernandinho replacement. And I don't think they've got there yet. And I think it's just a case of shopping around Europe maybe for that. Maybe not necessarily for next term, but for the long term. That's the one position I really feel they need to step up on. And you've got me thinking about centre-back position now, because obviously they've got four decent, very good centre-backs on the books, and they've got Mangala as well. Are you thinking they poach a high-ranking centre-back from somewhere?
Well, here's my where I am is, first of all, I wanted to ask you this. What has happened to John Stones? Is it just injury, or is it sort of, has he made a few mistakes here and there that have maybe led Pep Guardiola to lose some confidence in him? Because he has not become the maybe reliable starter, the consistent starter that I thought he would be for City.
This is the head scratcher for me. I think, I mean, he likes Laporte as a ball playing centre back, and we saw how good he was at charging into the box and getting that header in this Brighton game as well. I'm not sure if it's more that Stones has done something wrong, that Company's done something right, that he was the right man for this team to lead at this stage of the season, that obviously he's got aerial prowess against the less creative teams, which comes in useful, although that doesn't explain why he played against, say, Tottenham in the Champions League over Stones. It is an interesting one, because he was basically the poster boy. When he first came in, he was the poster boy for the way Pep wanted to play, and even though he made plenty of mistakes when he first started up, Guardiola stuck with him through thick and thin and has turned him into, not turned him into, has made him, adapted him to the style of play that City play. So to answer your question, I have no idea.
Yeah, I mean, no, that's fair, though. But I think I guess that to me is where some of my uncertainty about center backs comes from, is that I don't quite know where Stones is in Pep Guardiola's estimations. And then we've talked about maybe Company moves on, or maybe he sees fewer minutes. And so right there, then you're looking at Laporte and Otamendi. Otamendi has had his issues in the past, and some disciplinary, some focus-related. He's also been linked with a move to Atletico Madrid. City, for their part, have been linked with Atleti's defensive midfielder Rodri, who has a €70 million release clause. There's been some speculation that maybe Atletico don't want to let Rodri go, but he has that release clause, so maybe they'll negotiate a lower fee with a sort of, and then we get Otamendi as well. Again, that's all speculation, but that's, sorry, am I saying Rodri?
No, you said Rodrigo, and it made me think of Rodrigo, sorry.
Okay, I gotcha, sorry. So I guess I feel like that is a spot. I'm with you on defensive midfield, and maybe Rodri fills that, but then the question is what happens with center backs, and so maybe that's an area where they look to strengthen as well. But I do think they probably continue in the way they've been going, with maybe one signing, maybe two signings, not necessarily under the radar. They'll probably happily splash some cash to strengthen, but I think it will also probably be players who are coming in knowing that they're not necessarily going to be starting every single game, might not even be starting half the games, and so will need to kind of content themselves with improving and sort of earning a spot in that squad, if not just getting it outright.
I mean, aside from the idea of building for the future, which would be the defensive midfield quandary, I wonder if they did spend it, would be spending for the sake of it a little bit. I mean, we've seen with the things, Tottenham, they didn't spend anything, and they've done quite well this season. I think you probably agree. I wonder whether adding another ingredient to this delicious pudding would make it any better or not at this stage.
Yeah, because I guess there's something to be said for stability and keeping everybody happy, and just as long as you can bring everybody back, they're a year older, but you've got depth there, you've got plenty of talent, so maybe it's not as big of a deal. But then if you do need to shake things up, if you do just kind of if you feel like, the locker room got a little stale, maybe we need somebody else to come in. I didn't really like having to find 6 different possible replacements for Fernandinho, or I wasn't necessarily happy with all of our center backs, then maybe that's where they look to kind of increase squad depth. But I think either way, I would expect City to be top 4 for sure next season.
I mean, there's going to be quite a lot of players from the other side of Manchester who probably will need a job this summer, so maybe they could think about some of them. Maybe there's, I'm sure there are streets that need sweeping or trash cans that need changing at the Etihad campus. They could help them out.
I mean, I feel like they've signed former Man United players in the past. I feel like the shoe is firmly on the other foot in terms of the players they might be getting this time around. But yes, there will be some United players available for purchase, available on a free, I would guess. But before we get to this shambles of Manchester United, we should probably spend some time praising Liverpool. Yes. They do get the 2-0 win over Wolves. They push City all the way until the very end. And as you said, for 83 seconds, there was optimism, and I think deserved optimism, because the thing that, like, I kept feeling like there was going to be some twist in this. It did feel like maybe it would require another Sergio Aguero, like, 92nd minute goal, and it takes it away from Liverpool, or the other way around. And I think I end up being not surprised by the way it went, because I felt like City always had the strength and the depth and the kind of experience to finish top. But I'm still surprised that there weren't more kind of deviations from the norm along the way, because it did feel like Liverpool were destined for something. And I think that's why maybe the turnaround against Barcelona stands out all the more, because now even if they don't win the Premier League, decent chance they win the Champions League final. And then suddenly it's, push City all the way to the brink, can kind of come back next season in a stronger position, and maybe possibly win the Champions League. That's a decent way to end the season.
Yeah, not a bad consolation prize, really, that one, is it? I think in many ways this Premier League title race was absolutely thrilling, but in many other, possibly more accurate ways, it was actually quite boring the way they both finished so strong, wasn't it? I think that's the point we're getting at there. And Liverpool fans have a lot of things to know. They have many quantums of solaces, if we're going to use Bond terms here, to make themselves feel better about this. United have finished the season terribly. That's good for them. They got two of the Golden Boot winners on their side. That's pretty good for them. They got the Golden Glove, Virgil van Dijk Player of the Year by the Premier League and by the Football Writers Association. They blew in a Champions League final. I mean, if you overlook the fact that they blew a 9-point lead in dramatic fashion, well, not that dramatic, in very slow fashion, then it's not too bad. And that's what got me about the quotes that Jurgen Klopp gave at the end of the season. He said, "We really could have done more. When your opponent is City, it's difficult. They couldn't get rid of us, and we couldn't get rid of them. We've improved so much to close a 25-point gap from last season." To me, that's Klopp really, picking out he's picking out the facts there. We really couldn't have done more, he says. You could have not dropped that 9-point gap. And then he says, we've improved so much to close a 25-point gap from last season. Well, you did once again drop that 9-point gap. So you're kind of, cherry picking your facts a little bit there, but I mean, I'm not disparaging Liverpool here. Obviously, a tremendous finish. The top two teams here getting 195 combined points is quite ridiculous. And to finish the season, this equals their club record of winning 30 games in a league season. Last time they did that was in the 70s when there were 42 games. So, really incredible achievement. But to say we really couldn't have done more, you could have done more.
Yeah, I take your point, and I take your point and kind of disagree with it at the same time, because I go back to some of the articles I read when we were, because in the lead up to discussing Riyad Mahrez, it was sort of like you could cherry pick these moments of he missed this and he didn't do that and this didn't quite go so well and he should have done that, and therefore it was a bad season. And it's like, well, you're talking about a missed shot in October and a missed penalty in November and another start in December and then this one at the end of March. And so it feels kind of spread out. And I think you can, as you said, I think Klopp kind of cherry picking there. But I think you can also kind of cherry pick moments that Liverpool could have been better. But I think the difference is that normally when there's kind of a slip or there is that 9 or 7 point drop, I think that's been in 2019, you have these moments where it's very obvious near the end, where it's Liverpool are in pole position and then they lose one and then they draw one and suddenly City overtake. And I think the fact that happened in basically January and February, was really when that kind of gap got closed, and then City overtook when they play each other. I think that was even in January that City beat Liverpool, and that was kind of seen as this could be a monumental moment. But because it happened so long ago, it kind of fades, and it feels almost nitpicky to go back to the beginning of 2019, whereas both of these teams have been on such amazing runs. Yeah. So I think you're totally right that it was Liverpool kind of giving up those points, but it was also fair to assume when that happened that but City are going to drop points at some point. There's no way they can just win everything. That's insane. And then they win 14 straight, and it kind of is insane.
I think it really shows how important it is when you hit your rough patch in a season as well, because City got their losses out of the way in December. Then they were like, yep, we're going to be strong for the rest of the season. Where at that point, at sort of New Year, you were like, Liverpool, they've got a good lead here. They've still got to have that rough patch. Nobody gets through without that rough patch. And there we got it. January and February is when they started to drop those points again. And it felt important for City to get it out of their system before New Year for me. And I think that was important, and it just shows you how important it is to peak and trough at the right moment. And another example you could say even at the other end of the table is Cardiff. Look how strong they finished in that campaign. They'd have done that, 7 or 8 weeks ago. Could have been a different story, maybe a different momentum they would have had. So it's a bit of a shame in that respect.
Well, I mean, to be fair, they're playing terrible opposition, so I think you can't really give them too much credit on that one. I do also want to say about Liverpool, though, that Liverpool, similar to Man City, are a team that I think have been smart in their recruitment, and you can. If you're a Liverpool hater, you can absolutely ding them for it's easy to be smart in your recruitment when you're spending £70 million on this player and £65 million on this player and you're willing to splash cash to get the players you need. But I guess, again, it goes back to me, that's modern Premier League. You've got to splash cash and you've got to be able to effectively identify your vulnerable areas and be a little bit ruthless. And I think that's what Liverpool did in bringing in Alisson and letting go of Loris Karius and kind of relegating Simon Mignolet. And Alisson has been a standout performer for them. I think that was money well spent. I think the ability to sign Naby Keita and then wait until he's ready, or wait until he's allowed to go, that's an amount of patience that I think a lot of Premier League clubs don't have, but I think he's been a strong signing for them. And then even the way they've kind of gone about finding players at a discount, getting Xherdan Shaqiri for $12 million, I think it was, something like that. That's insane, and that's a player who fills in capably in a second leg of a Champions League semifinal that you have to win 4-0 or at least 3-0, and he has rough patches, certainly, but still gets an assist for a goal and plays smart and plays well and does what's asked of him. And I think that right there, it shows you that I think Liverpool are on the right track and continue to be on the right track in their recruitment policy. And they're one who I expect to strengthen. I think their CEO came out and said that Klopp would be backed in the offseason. So I think they'll probably get stronger to try to keep pace or overtake Man City. But they've really put themselves in a good position with the players they've gone after and the way they've gone after them.
Does backed mean drunk in German? Is that what you're saying?
Yes, something like that. Yes.
No, I'm just teasing. Well, it does raise the point, though. We do assume that City are going to get even stronger over the summer, but can Liverpool keep up this kind of pace on City next season as they've done this season, or is this a one-off? They've sort of burned a lot of their jets off with this one?
It's tough because they have had injuries. I mean, you've had Firmino missing time, and then Divock Origi comes in and does Divock Origi things, which I guess now means scores goals. And Daniel Sturridge is still there. Maybe not quite the way he would have expected to be, but still around. And it's you have depth in spots, and that's where I think that will require more ruthlessness from Liverpool in terms of, we've got this guy, he's a capable replacement. But look at Man City, where if Sergio Aguero gets hurt, I think there was a study that came out that was the most used or most repeated substitutions. Man City's most repeated substitution, or most common one, was Sergio Aguero out, Gabriel Jesus in.
Yeah.
That's a decent replacement to have, whereas I wouldn't say that you would rather have Gabriel Jesus starting for you than Divock Origi, and I think that's just being honest. I think you would rather have Riyad Mahrez or Leroy Sané as your replacements over Xherdan Shaqiri, even if that's a smart signing. And so I think if you're Liverpool, you have to look at it as we've got players who've gotten us here, but if we want to move to that next level, we can't really rest on that, and we can't really get sympathetic, and that will require being a little bit ruthless, I think, and maybe signing a player who's going to come in and maybe supplant one of your starters or remove one of your kind of favorite bench players, and that may be the way they have to go in order to move forward.
Well, I hear Coutinho might be available this summer. They should go for him.
Oh, my goodness. It does. There were so many stories. Again, I'm not a Liverpool fan, but to see those stories about Klopp had said to him, stay here, you'll be a legend, we'll build around you, go to another club like Barcelona, and you'll just be another player. That really seems to have come to fruition. And I think with the way it went in that semifinal, I think Coutinho might be looking back and thinking, ooh, maybe I made a mistake. Because I think things are going to be awkward at Barcelona, and there may be some change there this summer. We shall see. Whereas Liverpool, I would expect, will probably stick with Jurgen Klopp and keep things running the way they've been running.
I expect they will. I expect they might stick with this formula. Just be interested to see if they can keep up that intensity. And obviously they're going to be intense, but whether they can, go round for round with City next season, I'll be very interested to see that. And who will be among them, and who maybe it'll still be another 20 points between those two teams and the others. Who's to say? It's the rich tapestry of this thing we call the Barclays.
There we are. Well, we have more Premier League to discuss, certainly, but I also wanted to talk about today's sponsor, Dollar Shave Club. Ryan Bailey, I would like to know how you got ready for your day. So you're going to the dentist. I'm assuming you're like me and that you want to be at least a little bit put together when you're going out in public. And when you have an engagement like the dentist, you're at least kind of brushing and flossing. But I'm wondering, how did you get ready? What's your daily schedule? Are you shaving every day? Is it an every other day sort of situation?
I am a twice weekly, or bi-weekly if you will, shaver. I like to get it in twice a week. And I did it this morning because if I'm going to somewhere where someone's going to be touching my face a lot, I don't want to be a gross and gruff, hairy, manly man. I want to be nice and smooth for the dentist. Courteous of me.
That makes sense. What about flossing? Where are you on flossing? We need to talk about this.
I do flossing once every 6 months when the hygienist does it for me.
I was flossing. I think I've said this before, but I was flossing like once a week and thought I was doing great. And then my wife told me that you're supposed to do it once a day, and my whole world was thrown into disarray. I'm not sure what to make of that. Then you read stuff that
they're saying you shouldn't floss at all. I mean, I don't know where I stand with it.
My cousin, who's an ER doc, has always he's always held out on eating kale, not because he doesn't like it, but because he's waiting just out of spite for the story about how kale actually gives you some horrible disease. Because everything, it seems, at some point becomes a negative thing. But not Dollar Shave Club, because they have everything you need to prepare for the dentist or just your day in general, because if you want to brush your teeth in the morning, as you probably should, they've got toothbrushes, they've got wonderful toothpaste, they've got shave butter, shave lather, post-shave creams and scrubs and all that good stuff to make sure you are smooth. So if the dentist is handling your face, he or she might wonder, like, wow, this skin is perfect. Maybe they overlook your poor flossing record because your skin is so nice. And then they've got shampoo, conditioner, face wash, soap, all that stuff to get you ready in the shower as well. So from top to bottom, from head to toe, Dollar Shave Club has everything you need to get you going for your day. And right now, you can get a Dollar Shave Club starter set for just $5 each. Ryan, how can they do that? What does Dollar Shave Club have for our listeners?
Dollar Shave Club's got these little sets, as you say, $5. It's got a shower one that's got a body cleanser, a shampoo, and a daily face cleanser in it. They've got the oral care set, which is toothpaste and toothbrush, as you would expect from a oral care set. And also they have the shaving set with razor cartridges, a razor handle, shave butter, butter, post-shave dew, and prep scrub, not pep scrub. I think Pep uses pep scrub, right?
He does,
yes. And if you want to get those...
Prep scrub, yep.
You've got to go to dollarshaveclub.com/TSS. You can get all of those or any of those sets for just $5 of your American dollar. That's dollarshaveclub.com/TSS. One more time, dollarshaveclub.com/TSS for those sets. I'm going to be getting some of those myself. They look jolly splendid. I love I love a really good, like, manly shower gel that has like a manly scent to it, because a lot of the shower gels in my home have been gendered, non-specific gender in the past.
I'm familiar with what you're getting at.
But when you get to like a manly one, it's like, I don't need to put aftershave or a spray on today. I've just used a manly shower gel. I'm all good.
The one that I will say, like, I felt awkward with that, because I was like, oh, I'm sure my wife prefers it when I smell of lavender and honey. and then like the first time we got Dollar Shave Club, I used their facial cleanser and their the body soap, and she was like, you smell good, and I was like, oh, okay. So apparently that is preferred over lavender and honey and whatever else. So
I prefer it when you smell of lavender and honey, for the record.
Okay, well, that's fair. I'll make sure to set that aside for you, Ryan. But then, and I've said before, I don't think it's in one of their starter sets, but if you want to look at their individual products, you listeners, or Ryan, I do use their pomade pretty religiously, because it is very strong. It has a nice hold, but it doesn't give it that sort of waxen consistency that nobody ever needs.
I'm in the market. I want to try that. I'm going to try that for sure.
We are. See? I'm just making sales to Ryan. That's my goal now. But again, yes, dollarshaveclub.com/TSS. Thank you very much to Dollar Shave Club for sponsoring today's episode. Ryan, I think we now have to talk about Manchester United. I warned you in advance, this may end up in a little bit of a rant. This is something that Daryl frequently has to navigate, but he's not here right now, and I'm feeling agitated.
I'm sorry. Well, the following things that I'm going to relay to you, Tate, might not help that agitation. I'm going to lay down some headlines for you. 8 losses in the last 12. Yep. Only beaten, Watford and West Ham since March. Man United have only kept 2 home clean sheets in the Premier League this season. Their fewest at Old Trafford in a top-flight campaign since the 60s. 32 points finishing behind the champions this season, the furthest they've been from the top since they were promoted back to the top flight in 1975. And if I'm not mistaken, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's form since he was brought in has got points good enough for 15th place in the league. Relegation form from Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Obviously, when Jose Mourinho left...
We're staying up. 15th is still staying up. So there's that.
That's a good achievement if you're Brighton. Not necessarily if you're Manchester United.
Who sacked their manager today, by the way. Brighton did. So maybe not a good enough achievement.
Yeah, we could probably talk about that later. But yeah, the facts are Jose Mourinho left the club in 6th place. They finished in 6th place, but it doesn't feel like there's been any progress made. Maybe a bit of negative progress, if you will, in this team. I shall defer to you to give your thoughts on your lovely team and the finish to the season that they have had, because I doubt you're feeling very clever about it.
I'm not. And I think the reason for that is not just because it's been a bad season, which it has been, a difficult season, if you want to use, I think, the word that the players have all been told to say, because in every social media post, it was a lot of difficult and challenging and this sucked, we know.
Yeah.
But I think it's been that in and of itself, like that happens. You have down seasons. I think it's just that I look at Manchester United and I don't see a way that they get better. Or let me rephrase. I see obvious ways they get better. I see obvious ways that would make them competitors, if not for the title, then at least for top 4 next season.
Yeah.
But I don't think those avenues are going to be taken. And I think a big part of that, yes, you can talk players, you can talk Solskjaer, and there are reasons to criticize both of those, but I think it keeps going back to me to the front office and the decisions that they've made. I mean, I would even say, as I've said on the show before, the hiring of Solskjaer, it's not just that they hire him on a permanent deal out of motivation or out of sort of emotion, which I do think is part of it.
Yeah.
Carl Anka was on here, and he talked about how it's also kind of a cost-cutting measure, and I think it is. He's on £7.5 million per season, 3-year deal. That's more than Klopp. That's more than Emery. That's more than Sarri.
Yeah.
Basically, it's third only to Guardiola and then Pochettino, who's on $8 million at Spurs. Mourinho was on $15 million. And so that, to me, it's like 7.5 seems like a lot for Solskjaer, but when you realize that they probably, if they went after Pochettino, probably would have had to give him more than Mourinho. So then 7.5 compared to 16 or 17, you understand why they made that move. And I guess that's what it keeps coming back to for me, is that it just seems like it's a club that's more of a business at this point. And I think a lot of decisions get made with business in mind. I promise I haven't been meaning to shape it this way, but like this is what I'm talking about with City and Liverpool, that yes, they're willing to spend money, and that's a big part of it, that maybe businesses don't always want to spend as much money as they can, but they're also willing to cut costs or kind of concede to having wasted money if a player didn't work out, whereas I think United don't want to do that. And so I think they stick with players. I don't think they're going to be able to get rid of Alexis Sanchez, certainly not easily. And I think a big part of that is because nobody wants to be able to be the one who has to take the blame. Ed Woodward doesn't want to have to say, yeah, we shouldn't have made this deal. It was dumb. It has kind of destroyed our wage structure. Now everybody wants more money and we can't really afford it. It's easier to say, well, I don't know why the manager's not playing him, and maybe the player himself just isn't motivated, and you don't really have to explore the sort of errors in your thinking. And so until they hire somebody who I think can do that, which would be a director of football, an experienced director of football, I don't see how they get any better from here.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Sanchez, by the way, saying on his social media outlets that I have tried to be professional all the time. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well done. That's
excellent.
Literally the very minimum we could expect from you, Alexis. Thank you very much for that. Let me lay out a scenario for you in the coming weeks, though, Tate. Put your ears around this one. Mm-hmm. Champions League final. Let's say, in a crazy world, Tottenham Hotspur win it.
Yep.
Let's say Mauricio Pochettino goes, that's the summit of my experience at Tottenham Hotspur. Can't get any better than that. I shall do, say, what Mourinho did in 2010 at Inter. I'm going to step away at this point because that's it, right? Mm-hmm. Then let's say Manchester United are like, oh, there's Pochettino, the manager we've been linked with for most of the year before we gave the permanent job to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. Shall we sack this guy and shall we get Pochettino instead? How do you think that scenario plays out? Is that something that could happen? Because I think it maybe should.
I guess it could happen if they had if they continued this run of form and if things didn't look like they'd improved after a full preseason and an offseason where maybe Solskjaer is able to get rid of some players, bring in some new players. If it doesn't seem like there's much progress, then maybe. But I think this is what I'm saying is that no, I don't think they end up doing that because they've spent. At this point, they've invested $22.5 million. They will have invested in the Solskjaer's contract. I'm assuming a huge chunk of that is guaranteed, and I'm going to guess there's no way they could have gotten him, at least for this season and probably for next season, on a Champions League guarantee sort of contract, like what they had with David Moyes, where if he didn't make Champions League, if United didn't qualify for the Champions League, then they could fire him at a discounted rate. There's no way Solskjaer would have agreed to that.
No.
This season, because there's no guarantee that they would have gotten top 4, especially in the position he took over. So I think that they probably don't have much recourse to get him out of his contract, so it then means paying him that full amount. And I guess that's what I mean, is I think that they don't want to take that hit. Ed Woodward doesn't want to have to say, yeah, I made a mistake, we shouldn't have signed him. That's the, fourth manager now that I've sacked, that's been sacked since I took over. Maybe it's only the third? Yeah, it's fourth manager since I took over, but it's still it's not a good look for him, so I don't think they would do it. Yeah. And that's what's especially troubling for me as a fan, not as a person who is supposed to be neutral and does a show, but it's the idea that, you could have Pochettino out there, who I think would be a very good manager and has proven himself to be a very good manager.
Back up here. You think they wouldn't do it because they think it looks bad? You think this is a club that worries about if it looks bad?
Yeah, I think they worry about if it looks bad from a business standpoint.
For their stock price.
I don't think that they care.
For their official diesel engine partner.
Exactly. That's what I think they care about. I think that Ed Woodward is a business-forward, business-facing person, and I think he doesn't like the metrics of, I made this appointment, and it's not working, so we're going to get another one in there. I think at a certain point, he has to take a hit, and I think he probably does what he can to make sure that hit doesn't fall on him. Yeah. So I think that it will be, Solskjaer can't even write this locker room, and these players just don't want it enough, and I think you get those narratives coming out as a result. I do think that there's probably going to be a clear out to the extent possible, but I really I went through a list, and I feel like if I gave you 10 players' names, you would probably lean towards, they could probably be sold or gotten rid of. And there's no way you get rid of 10 players in an offseason. Yeah. And there's no way you do that without a director of football who has a plan in place. So it's just it's still just a very confusing thing as a fan. And I think it's probably led to a lot of disillusionment from Manchester United's fans. And I don't necessarily know how they get them back. I don't think selling Paul Pogba is going to be the answer, but I also think that's something they're going to do this summer as well.
Would that not be best for the team in general, selling him though? Not just for the funds it will create.
It's confusing because I still don't know. I still enjoy Paul Pogba as a player, as a person. I enjoy him, and so I would like it to work. And I think we've seen in moments where he was kind of utilized properly and felt properly motivated and included. I would say Juventus and France in the World Cup, where he was effectively a role player. He wasn't Paul Pogba taking the game by the scruff of the neck and making things happen. He was almost a number 8 who sat in at right back on occasion, or occasionally at left back when he needed to. That's a role player, and that shows to me that he will do that if it feels like the kind of players around him are all kind of working towards the same goal. And I think when they're not, you see Paul Pogba as the individual emphasized. I'm sure people have seen this, but if not, it's pretty damning. The second Cardiff goal, I believe it was basically him just failing to mark on a throw-in and letting his player just run behind him, fails to track Murphy. Murphy then squares it, and it's a goal for Cardiff.
Yeah.
But just right there, that's the complete lack of motivation from him, and I think then you see him kind of getting into it with fans at the end of the game, and there was a little bit of them saying, you're a disgrace, which he probably is not going to take too nicely. But I think there's a reason why those fans are frustrated, and I do think that if maybe he has felt a little bit frustrated by the way the season has gone, I think there's a decent chance that he is going to end up at Madrid if those talks haven't illegally already started. And that, I really do think that. I think Paul Pogba probably leaves, and I think it will be spun as, he was a distraction this season, and now we can sort of reinvest that money and focus on building a core squad.
Yeah.
But I don't really know then who is the person you build around in that core squad. Is it Marcus Rashford? Is it Scott McTominay? Is it Lindelof? Are those the names that players out there are going to rally around and want to go to Manchester United to play with under Ole Gunnar Solskjaer? I don't really know.
I mean, all I can say is I can't wait for the show mid-July when we're talking about the Neymar deal and how he's going to improve Man United.
Oh, I mean, Neymar... That might be the top of my list of players I don't want Manchester United to go after. Gareth Bale is up there somewhere. Daryl, by the way, vehemently disagrees. Daryl thinks Manchester United should go for Gareth Bale. I will leave him to advocate that one.
They do like wasting money.
So there you go. Exactly. Perfect. That is an Ed Woodward move. Is get rid of Paul Pogba, bring in Gareth Bale. Perfect. What could go wrong?
Yeah.
And I don't want to ramble on too much more about this, but I am going to for one more moment, because I guess what I've kind of been trying to get to, but it's hard to, is just the idea that usually I think if you're in a situation, I guess Arsenal maybe is an example, maybe a bad example, or Wolves. Wolves are definitely a team that's going to strengthen, but have a coach who clearly the players believe in, have an ownership group who are willing to spend money, and they seem to be building around the kind of strategy and approach their manager wants, and so they're bringing in players that fit that or can play in that system. And I feel like, so if you're a Wolves fan, as Daryl is, you kind of look towards next season with a lot of optimism because there's a plan in place. So any player that's brought in, it seems like they're being brought in to kind of fit within that system. And I think that's what I go back to with Manchester United, is that there's no director of football. They're on their fourth permanent manager since Sir Alex Ferguson stepped away now. And I don't really know what they do like from this point in terms of, if you bring in players, if you don't have a director of football, is it more of the same? They've spent, I think, £870 million since June of 2011. Under Mourinho, they spent over $400 million on 11 players alone. So that's $470 million under Sir Alex Ferguson, David Moyes, and Van Gaal up until the Jose Mourinho era. And so you've got this kind of mishmash of players signed by various managers or kind of motivated by various managers to be signed. And I don't know how you then kind of move forward and what signing would make me be like, yep, okay, this is definitely a step in the right direction. Now I get it. And so it feels like no director of football, ownership that's maybe a little bit too business facing, a manager that they promoted prematurely, a squad that needs a clear out and reinvestment, but also no one really to oversee that investment. And it really leaves me scratching my head as to what they're going to do. And it's why I'm not nearly as optimistic about next season as probably Wolves fans should be, for example.
I totally understand that. I mean, it does look like such a big job. I mean, I'm just looking at the squad. I'm looking at thinking, which of these players would actually get into another of, say, the top four teams right now? Which of these players would you even put in, in their squad? I mean, maybe Pogba and Rashford, I'm thinking, but I wouldn't take anyone else and put them in any one of those other teams. In a combined, say, City and United 11, I wouldn't put any of these players in. Would you?
No, I mean, I think the one that people used to hang their hat on was, it would usually get like David De Gea would be thrown in there. They'd throw in one defender, like usually Luke Shaw. I'm saying seasons past, like Luke Shaw might get in there because City's left backs are like occasionally inconsistent, or like Benjamin Mendy, Zinchenko. I don't know if those are two that would necessarily go in over Luke Shaw. Fabian Delph probably wouldn't either. So maybe those are like the two, but again, those are like very conditional. It's not and you kind of have to make the argument. And nowadays, I would say a combined City United 11 is probably Man City. Yeah. And maybe Paul Pogba gets thrown in because he's Paul Pogba, but that's only because of his like kind of reputation and his like moments of brilliance, and not necessarily because he looks unplayable or is definitely one of the best central midfielders that you could kind of throw in there. If Guardiola were coaching him, maybe that's the case, but he's not, so he isn't.
But like, do the same exercise with Chelsea, or do the same with with Liverpool. I don't see any of these players getting any of those teams really either. It's just a really. I feel sorry for you, and I don't very rarely feel sorry for Manchester United fans because you've had a decent run. But
I appreciate.
You just look at that. Look at that. It's so underwhelming in terms of what Manchester United should be. Oh, it's wonderful. I love it.
I know you do. Here's my question then for you. Which would you rather be a fan of at this point? Manchester United, given everything we've said, or Chelsea, given the kind of looming transfer ban and the fact that I believe it has become public that Eden Hazard is going to be joining Real Madrid for around 100 million euros? So which one do you think is in a rougher situation right now? It is amazing to me that I'm not sure I know the answer to this.
You coming to me personally as a supporter of another team in Southwest London, a couple of miles away from Chelsea, so my answer difficultly would be Chelsea. I think they're in less of a. I mean, got much better. I think you'd have much higher hopes for next season if you're a Chelsea fan, even if they don't have any. Even if the ban does take hold, because I think they've got a good core squad in place. I think Sarri has another year to build upon. I think you've got so many players you could bring in. Should we full blown talk about Chelsea now? Because I could go on to this one definitely.
Let's do it.
I mean, look at all.
I've ranted enough about Manchester United for sure.
You stay pretty calm during that. I'm impressed with your control there. Well done on that one. And I've said this before.
Well, I had a lit lighter like held below my palm for the entire time, just to sort of kind of manage the pain.
Have you cracked your desk in half? I'm sure you have. Yeah. I mean, I think I've said this before in this show. Not buying anyone isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. We've seen it work for Tottenham. City only added one player last season, effectively, and I don't see it being a big problem, particularly for Sarri, who doesn't like to rotate that very often anyway. And look at all the players they got to fall upon who are on loan. They got Tammy Abraham, who's been bossing it in the Championship, and Batshuayi, Bakayoko's been doing much better in Italy this season. And you've got Reece James at Wigan, who's a pretty versatile player. Kurt Zouma, Mason Mount, and players at Chelsea who could get a bigger role, who very much deserve a bigger role, like Loftus-Cheek or Callum Hudson-Odoi. Yep. There's so much. But I think, not only do they have a much better squad on paper than Manchester United, but I feel like they've got more potential, and they've got a manager with a philosophy, even if the backroom aren't necessarily working towards that philosophy. But I would feel much more positive if I were a Chelsea fan, and I think that's a fairly obvious answer, is it not?
Yeah. No, I think it is. I think worth noting, you pointed this one out before we started recording. So FIFA rejected Chelsea's transfer ban appeal. Chelsea have said they will take it to the Court of Arbitration for Sport, and I think that's the usual protocol that teams that have had this in the past, Barcelona and Atleti, to name two. Basically, they do that. That gives them that summer to then be able to sign players. Then they're banned for what it would be January of 2020 and the summer of 2021. And so I think that's probably what they will go for. I've said before, I don't necessarily know if they need to, because I think that they've kind of already been preparing for the loss of Eden Hazard. I am not saying that Christian Pulisic is a like-for-like replacement for Eden Hazard, but I do think he was signed in with like a lens toward we're probably going to lose this very creative wide attacker or player who can play wide as an attacker. Maybe Christian Pulisic can fill those shoes a little bit, and he kind of softens that blow a tiny bit. And so I think that they've kind of done a little bit of preparatory work there. And then I think you're absolutely right that the math I have in front of me is that they have 40-plus players on loan, 20 youth players signed to professional deals, and 25 on their full roster, not including those youth players. That's more than 85, players on their books right now. So I think even if they lose Eden Hazard, who's a massive player for them, even if they weren't to appeal this ban, they would still have 85-ish players that they could choose from to form a senior squad, and a senior squad that I think would be pretty solid. That said, I think they will then maybe look to appeal this and splash a bit of cash if they are going to let go of Eden Hazard for 100 million euros. Yeah. That gives them enough money to sign a few players. I think then you've got to look at, say, like Callum Hudson-Odoi. Yes, he could get more time. The injury will factor into that one. I think it was a blown Achilles, I think. So that may keep him out for a good long while, probably through some big chunk of next season as well.
His Achilles heel is his Achilles heel, definitely.
Yeah, exactly. So, but I still think there's enough depth and enough talent already on the books that they'll be just fine. And then if they strengthen a little bit more, I see Chelsea in a very strong position, especially since, Tottenham will probably need to reinforce. I think there's going to be lots of clubs coming in to try to get some of Spurs' players this offseason, both from the Premier League and abroad. Real Madrid looming large there. I think Arsenal will need to retool or at least kind of figure some things out for themselves. Manchester United we've already talked about. So I think Chelsea are in a significantly stronger position than I would have expected them to be, for sure.
Definitely. And they're in Boston right now, by the way, for not really any good reason. That's fun, isn't it?
You got to try to get out of the ban while you can. You flee to Boston.
Exactly, yeah. Going into Boston. Was that the Dropkick Murphys? Possibly.
That's a discount version of shipping
up to Boston. Yes. That's it. I've watched The Departed. I know that it's in that film about 10 times. But the Court of Arbitration for Sport, I was going to say, can you imagine a worse job than working for them, having high-powered lawyers from top clubs, mainly Spanish ones, it seems, coming to you saying, "Oh, we've been banned. But didn't stick to the rules. Yeah, but we don't want to have the ban, even though we didn't stick to the rules." Oh, what a job that must be.
I would say, that at least is the club sort of admitting that they maybe didn't do it right to some extent. I feel like that over, was it City's lawyers or PSG's lawyers who were just like, fine, take us to court, we'll destroy you.
Yeah, that was City, wasn't it? Yeah, we will unleash the power of 1,000 lawyers upon you.
Exactly. I think I'd rather have the club come in and sort of be like antagonistic, but only have maybe 10 lawyers, as opposed to the club come in with 8,000 lawyers and a whole bunch of photocopied documents that are like you can't then index, and they're just going to make it impossibly difficult for you. I don't think it's a very fun job for them. I'm sure they're well paid for it, but yes, I would not look forward to having some of the probably future trials that they're going to have, or future cases that they're going to have.
I relate everything in my life to The Simpsons, and I just picture that Monty Burns has like a fire truck full of lawyers that pulls up, and like the sirens blaring, and they're all like hanging off the edge with their briefcases. I just imagine that just pulling up at the CAS offices every so often. Oh, boy.
A fire truck makes sense. I feel like City would be a double-decker bus, maybe. I don't know if they would. I feel like it would be more luxurious than that. But I would expect several busloads of lawyers to be involved if City ever have to end up having to do anything. But we should move on to like actual soccer. Not all leagues are finished. There are other competitions that are still taking place. We should maybe move to the Bundesliga if that works for you. The title race still on with one game remaining. I am surprised by that, but still not really willing to go back on my earlier statement that I feel like Bayern Munich have won this title or will end up winning this title.
Yeah, it does seem rather inevitable that Bayern Munich will get this done, but it was fun to see Borussia Dortmund do their will they, won't they, win this game thing, which they seem to be doing quite a lot lately. This seemed like a very entertaining game, which once again we saw Christian Pulisic put an absolutely brilliant performance in, which was nice to see. And we've got 2 points separating them at the moment, with Bayern Munich playing Eintracht Frankfurt on the last day. Interestingly, I did a little look into their head-to-heads. They did beat them last year in the DFB Pokal, Frankfurt did, so there is a glimmer of hope there. But they haven't beaten Bayern in the league since 2010, and this one is at the Allianz Arena, so methinks Bayern will be the ones dousing each other in giant mugs of beer.
And I believe I'm correct in saying that the man who was coaching Eintracht Frankfurt in that final is now coaching Bayern Munich. So, yeah, I think that's probably maybe not a thing that Dortmund fans will love to hear.
Yeah.
We should know, Bayern home to Eintracht Frankfurt, Dortmund away to Gladbach. Frankfurt and Gladbach both chasing the final Bundesliga Champions League spot as well, which I believe Gladbach occupy right now. So both of those teams do have something to play for. But the other thing worth noting, so a draw would put them both level on points if Bayern drew and Dortmund won. So they're both on 76. The difference there being that Bayern right now have a plus 52 goal difference, Dortmund plus 35.
Yeah.
So it would need to be Dortmund winning by 18 and then Bayern drawing. Otherwise, I think basically a Bayern loss is what Dortmund are going to need, which, stranger things have happened. We shall see. It's been a weird end of the season overall because you have like the Champions League insanity, but then you also sort of have, as we've already talked about, the Premier League sort of going the way we thought it would. France went the way we thought it would. Spain, Italy went the way we thought they would. So we'll see if Germany kind of continue on with the kind of the narrative of the season. But instead of talking about that for right now, let's talk about Christian Pulisic for a moment because, as you said, another strong game for him in his final game at home for Dortmund. They're on the road, as I said. So maybe he continues this fine run of form. What do you think then the future holds for him at Chelsea? As I said, probably not the direct replacement for Eden Hazard that people would like to see. Chelsea fans would like to see, certainly. What do you think next season looks like for him? Do you think it's success? Do you think it's a good move? Any of those answers would be appreciated.
I think it is a good move, particularly securing his services before this ban comes in. Seems to be an inspired bit of in hindsight, it seems inspired anyway, doesn't it? And when the deal was first announced, I was thinking, oh, really? Where does he kind of fit into that team? But I think it makes sense the more you think about it, because of the way Chelsea play, because of the way Sarri play, that build-up play from the midfield, likes to put those through balls in either to the middle of the box or to those wide areas where a player cuts it back. And I could see Pulisic very much being suited to that kind of attacking movement as well. And just looking at the way he's ended this season, these last 3 or 4 games with Dortmund, he's looked sensational, hasn't he? So he's really gearing up for something here. And I think he's more than a match for the Premier League. So I'm definitely looking forward to seeing him playing in the Premier League. And particularly if Eden Hazard does finally gets his wish to go and join Mr. Zizou in Madrid, I think it'd be really good for them. And are you with me on this one?
I think this is the other reason why I sort of I would be more optimistic if I were a Chelsea fan than a United fan right now, is because Chelsea uncharacteristically stuck with Maurizio Sarri. Now, maybe they sack him this summer. I don't know. I feel like that's increasingly unlikely. And I think, if they get rid of Eden Hazard, not to paint him as the malcontent, but it feels like he is one who, of a couple Chelsea players who didn't really love Sarri ball, didn't really buy into the system, and has previous of not necessarily wanting to do things that he doesn't want to do for his manager, Jose Mourinho being the obvious one there. Jose Mourinho has beef with everybody, though, so, again, big grain of salt. But I do look at what I think of with the Napoli teams that were so successful under Maurizio Sarri, and it's hard work, and it's a lot of running, and it's buying into the system.
Yeah.
And Gonzalo Higuain has not looked as sharp as maybe Sarri would have liked, but I think another season, a preseason, maybe that helps him. If they end up getting him on like a permanent, I think he's still on loan. I can't remember if it's a permanent deal or not. But if they go for him, like he has familiarity. Jorginho obviously does. N'Golo Kante, while it hasn't been his best season, and there's been much made of him kind of being shifted out of his position, he seems like a player who just kind of is down for whatever he's been asked to do by his manager. That seems to be his MO. And so then you bring in Christian Pulisic, who I think will perform like the tasks given and what's asked of him, and I think will work hard and try hard. And I think that maybe is like oversimplification, but I think it's a big part of kind of endearing yourself to Maurizio Sarri. And so I think he will be a player that kind of fits what Sarri wants to do with Sarri ball or modified Sarri ball. And I think it ends up being a smart move for them and a solid move for them and a solid move for Christian Pulisic at a time when, even though he's getting minutes now and has started to improve, and I feel like was a direct response to me kind of talking about how he hasn't been dominant for Dortmund, it does still feel like he's kind of reached the point where he needs a move from Dortmund. And that's not a thing that I've ever said previously. I don't think Daryl and I talked about how he felt like he was in the perfect position at Dortmund, at a big club, still getting minutes, still playing in the Champions League. But it does feel like the way this season has gone, his lack of consistent minutes, his lack of consistent starts, it feels like it's a smart time for him to move. And it's a smart, I think, place for him to go if things kind of continue as we think they might. If they implode dramatically, as they also might, then maybe it ends up being a bad move. We shall see.
We shall see, indeed. But to continue my run of comparing everything to The Simpsons, Taylor, I'm seeing you in your Man United shirt disappear back into the hedge a la Homer, and then you're emerging with a nice blue shirt, or terribly designed blue shirt, as it were, for next season.
We'll see. I don't think I'll ever wear I do not think I will ever hardcore support another team again. The thing I have said before is what I feel like I may end up being is more of a sports atheist. I'll always root for DC United. I'll always root for Galatasaray. Manchester United, even if they're just shambles of a club, it's still Manchester United. The one they were linked with an ownership takeover from the Saudi government. That would do it for me. I think I would be out on Manchester United. Then I would kind of disappear into the hedge and emerge, I guess, either shirtless or just wearing an actual just t-shirt and not a Manchester United jersey, if we're going that Homer route.
Very principled of you. I like it.
I don't know. Whatever. I'm just gonna go wallow in my misery. But instead of doing that, I'm going to talk about the championship. Let's talk about that. That'll make me feel better. The championship playoffs. We're talking about teams that could eventually find their way to the Premier League. First legs are done. Aston Villa with a 2-1 win at home against West Brom. Derby with a 1-0 loss at home to Leeds United. Anything jump out to you from either of these games, Mr. Bailey?
Yeah, lots of things. I thought the Conor Hurricane goal in the Villa-West Brom game was pretty wonderful, wasn't it? Tammy Abraham had a very good shift, which I'm sure Chelsea will be keeping an eye on. And Dwayne Holmes in the Derby Leeds game. Did you see him in that in action? There's a clip going around on Twitter of him being an absolute pit bull, getting 3 or 4 tackles in a row. He looks vicious. He looks great. So I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more from him as well. I just thought these are the perfect pairings. Oh, one more thing I should say: Jack Harrison did an amazing assist for the goal in the Derby Leeds game as well. So that was really good to see too. But yeah, these two Championship semi-finals have been really well paired off. You've got the Midlands Derby, and then you've got the Spygate Derby in the other one. I'd like to see any one of these 4 teams in the Premier League, I think. The winner here is the consumer, me and you.
There we go. I think heading into this one, I was definitely pulling for Villa. I think I was mixed between Derby and Leeds. After watching the extended highlights of both of these games, missing the 3 tackles in a row, so I apologize for that. I think, Villa Leeds is probably what I would like to see in the championship final or playoff final. Just because, the goal that you talked about already, Jack Harrison with the ball in for Kamar Roof, that ball is that sort of perfect bending around the back line who are kind of dropping back in, but it's far enough away that the goalkeeper's never getting to it. It's just such a perfect ball. That's amazing. The finish is calm and composed and exactly what you want from your goal scorer. But it's also the fact that it's Leeds sort of playing a series of quick tempo, high tempo, short range passes that really pull Villa out and open up the space for Harrison to then be able to play that ball in. And it's just sort of you see that sort of combination and you're like, oh, right, Bielsa. Yeah, Bielsa's still there. So I think they would be a really exciting team to have in the final and to have back in the Premier League because it does feel like those players have bought in. And then for Villa, I think they're just kind of fun and chaotic to watch, and I enjoy that. I enjoyed Jack Grealish drawing a penalty, which Tammy Abraham converted, I think, as you mentioned. But Grealish had a lot of the ball, definitely seemed to be one of their kind of like key creators, and I thought did very well in that capacity. And I also think Villa have to kind of be favoring themselves because Dwight Gale scores a screamer of an opener for West Brom, but then trying to make something happen in the dying moments, goes in on a kind of what he thought I think was a 50-50 ball with the goalkeeper, was definitely not a 50-50 ball, gets his second yellow, gets the red card, so will be suspended for the second leg, which West Brom absolutely need to win and will need goals to win.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big negative for West Brom, and why I would not be surprised if it was Villa v Leeds in the final.
I'm with you on that one. I think Jack Grealish is an interesting case to look at because he was involved in all three goals, basically, wasn't he? Including the one against them where his pass was let through by Glenn Whelan, which is not unfortunate for Grealish. But he's one of those players, we did see him pretty young in the Premier League, and I wonder if he's one of those ones who's really, really super good in the Championship, but not quite at the level you need him at the Premier League. So I'd like to see give him another run at that level, definitely. And obviously, much respect to him for sticking with Villa through, his childhood club, the club he supports. So I'm a big fan of that. But I agree with you also. I'd like to see Leeds go through, just because I think, as you mentioned, that Bielsa style and having Bielsa in the top flight will be a lot of fun. But at the expense, Tate, of a Frank Lampard versus John Terry Championship playoff final. It'll be at the expense of that, and I kind of want to see that too.
Well, maybe if West Brom do pull it back, we can just petition to have a sort of third place game played. Or I guess fourth place game is what it would end up being. We could do that. I'd be fine with that one. So you can still get your wish if things don't go that way. But yes, if they do, then we'll get John Terry, Frank Lampard, the match that everybody has been clamoring for. I also think you're absolutely right though about Grealish. Like that there are moments against West Brom where he has the ball in West Brom's 18 and still has like 2 yards of space, and no one is really trying to close him down, and he's kind of able to look around and look around and look around. In fact, I think that's where the Harry Haynes screamer, the equalizer, comes from, is Grealish sort of having time and time and time, and then he's like, I guess I'll just lay it off for him to hit one time. I can't imagine that amount of time and lack of pressure in the Premier League.
No.
So we'll see. We'll see if he gets there, how he does. But to do so, the second legs must first be played. Second leg of Villa-West Brom, or I guess West Brom v Villa this time around, Tuesday at 3 p.m., then Leeds hosting Derby, Wednesday at 3 p.m. So we will have our championship final by the end of the week, or at least we'll have the kind of participants scheduled for that one. Few other things we wanted to talk about before we get done with the show today. Ryan, you put this one down, and I'm so happy you did. Should we talk Juventus shirts? Can we talk Juventus jerseys for a moment?
I'd love to. Juventus revealing their shirts for next season. They've gone away from the stripes, I believe, for the first time in 100 years. The quote from their people: "Tradition is no limit for Juventus, but a source of inspiration for the future. The 2019-20 home kit interprets this concept of selling out and promises to become the star of the next season." It's interesting, isn't it? Because the room, I don't know how substantiated this is, but on social media, the perception is that they've done their market research, and in the US, fans are confusing or thinking the shirts are too similar to referee jerseys out here. So they've decided to do it for the sake of the market here. Now, I'm not sure how true that is, as I say, and I actually quite like the way these new shirts look. And in their defense, I'd say look at Barcelona, who changed the stripes from the direction they go in to the amount of stripes to going half and half like Juventus do all the time. So I don't have a big problem with it. But what I do have a problem with is with Juventus really pandering. So they're really try-harding. They're try-harding so much with like changing their badge because they think it will suit young people better, and changing the shirt design because they think that young Americans will like it a bit more. I kind of compare them, unfairly or not, to like an Instagram model. They're just like really desperate for your attention in so many ways. I think they're going to start selling me protein shakes pretty soon. I think this is where we're going to get to.
And photoshopping their jersey to make it look appealing. Yeah, I think they'll be doing that too. That is the Instagram reality. I mean, I guess I kind of am of the mindset that either this is a damning criticism of global warming because they think this is what's going to happen to zebras, that they're just going to get increasingly less stripes, so they're trying to, represent that. Or more likely, I think it is an appeal to, I don't know if I even agree with this line of thinking that I'm kind of making up, but like it does feel like they're sort of looking at what is a jersey that like a casual soccer fan is going to buy? And they're probably going to buy something that's pretty basic, pretty simple, unless it's an amazing jersey like the Nigeria World Cup jerseys.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's because they've kind of made a statement, they've connected it to culture and identity, then that makes sense. Whereas for Juventus, I think they're not going to make that bold of a step, and they feel like, we've kind of done the stripes before, it's hard to move new ones, so let's just change it up completely, and maybe somebody will want to wear just a black and white kind of panel jersey with a weird pink stripe down the middle. Not sure about that one. But I do feel like it's an appeal towards selling more jerseys, either because you can only sell so many black and white striped jerseys before people feel like they have that, or just because they want to make it look a little bit more palatable. But I think they've gone the opposite route, and they've kind of removed the tradition and gotten away from something that I think most people would agree was a great look.
But hang on, we've already established that tradition is no limit for Juventus, Taylor. It's no limit to them. They're not bound by tradition.
Oh,
they're not even bound by playing to the rules in the league. We know that.
It is weird, man. I forget that they they redid the logo and then they got the Jeep sponsorship, right?
Not sure on the timeline.
I feel like that was the timeline, because I remember at the time people being like, "Oh, they've got a Jeep logo for their crest now. That's weird." And then suddenly they had Jeep on their shirt, and that may have just been like, maybe I'm misremembering. That's one. Two, that may have just been like coincidental that then Jeep came along and decided to pay a bunch of money. But I feel like there's three, which is that they had like some kind of a conversation about like, yeah, we'll get you involved in the redesign and it'll all look good. And all of those are indicative to me of Juve, that I could believe all of them again, which is a sign that they're just kind of making some decisions towards selling some jerseys, increasing market share, maybe trying to remain competitive for if and when the European Super League launches, and they can definitely be a part of that.
Well, their president, Agnelli, of course, is the president of the organisation trying to push for that European Super League. So there's some joined up thinking there you've just made.
Perfect. Let's end on a happier note, shall we? Let's. We talked about Germany briefly, very, very briefly, I should add. But we want to talk about Schalke for a moment, because David Wagner has taken over at Schalke, has been given the job there. Formerly of Huddersfield, was sacked this season, but in like very amicable circumstances. That it felt almost just like the board. We're like, yeah, it's kind of what we have to do at this point, but we recognize that we haven't given you any money and have the, like, I think the second lowest budget, if not the lowest budget. Cardiff might have had the lowest budget. But I think for what he did for keeping them up last season, for getting Huddersfield to the Premier League in the first place, like I would caution people, not that many people are, but I would caution people against sort of looking at this as like, a guy who got sacked by a team that was relegated, that's who Schalke are going for. And I would see it more as a guy who has played for Schalke, so has connections to the club, has coaching experience going back to Borussia Dortmund under Jurgen Klopp, and has kind of brought those new innovative ideas and has brought his own new innovative ideas to Huddersfield. I would expect him to do the same to Schalke, and I think it's a very solid appointment.
Yeah, definitely. And I think if you looked at the positions of not hiring someone because they've been sacked previously, then no one would ever get hired anywhere. And
there's that. Yes.
Look at Ranieri as well. Of course, falling upwards into his current position as well. So it's a similar thing. But I think it's a very good position for Wagner to be in, because he can't get any worse than nearly going down. So, I suppose you could go down.
I mean, getting relegated by Huddersfield and then with Schalke nearly going down. Yeah, he's in a strong position to it can't get any worse for me. I am happy where I am.
Yeah, but I mean, even in terms of the Schalke job, I mean, he can't do any worse than they've done this season. The only way is up,
I don't
right?
think so. Yeah, I cannot imagine them being back in the relegation zone, which they were in for a little bit of time. And I think even bottom half of the table, I don't expect to see that next season. And then I'm also excited because this is, again, maybe I'm reaching here, but David Wagner is a U.S. international. So there are plenty of Americans at Schalke. And I do like to think that maybe there's a chance that he, continues to give young Americans some minutes and some looks in the senior team. And certainly Weston McKennie, I think, will be a David Wagner favorite, not just because of the American connection, but because he is all about heart and hustle. And I think that will be a key component of Schalke next season.
Wunderbar.
Any other topics we did not get to or you would like to mention, Ryan, before we wrap up today?
Just my weekly mention of AS Wimbledon, how great we are, how Wally Downs deserves to be manager of the season. That's about it.
Of course. Okay. No more Simpsons references before we go?
Maybe. And one more thing I will say. Whenever you say your hello, your greeting at the start of the podcast, I always think of the moment in The Simpsons where they're like doing a parody of a sitcom and Homer walks into Moe's bar and goes, "Greetings."
I I will take that. That's how to be compared.
It's wonderful.
To The Simpsons in a somewhat favorable way. I will take 100%. So thank you for that, Ryan.
You're welcome.
And thank you very much for joining me to talk about lots of the Premier League, a little bit of Championship, a little bit of Bundesliga. I very much appreciate it.
Always a pleasure, never a chore.